Hi friends, welcome back to Python Programming with Akash. Today, we will write a program to print the following star pattern in Python. We will be using for loop, range function and print function to implement this program. If you are not fully confident with these concepts, I would recommend you to go through them once. To do that, you can refer to the videos on my channel whose links will be provided in the description box of this video. Let's start without any further ado. First of all, you need to know that these patterns are implemented through loops. We will be using two for loops for this, one loop inside another. So there will be an outer loop and an inner loop. The outer loop is used to generate the total number of rows in the pattern, and the inner loop is used to print what we want in each row. Here in our pattern we have 5 rows, so we need the outer loop to run 5 times. We can provide argument 5 to the range function to generate numbers 0 to 4, which means that the outer loop will run for a total of 5 times. Carefully make a note that each iteration of this loop will represent a different row for our pattern. So, if this loop runs for the first time, then it represents the first row of the pattern, and if it runs for the second time, it represents the second row of our pattern, so on and so forth. Now to generate the contents of rows, we need to use another for loop inside the previous for loop. Again, make a note that for each iteration of the outer for loop, this inner for loop will run for a certain number of times, and this will print the contents of each row. So, if the outer loop is running for the third time and the inner loop runs for a total of 5 times, for this third iteration of the outer for loop we are talking about, this means that the third row of the pattern is being printed, and the contents of the third row will be decided by the commands inside the inner for loop that will run for 5 times. For our pattern, we want 1 star to be printed for the first line, 2 stars to be printed for the second line, so on and so forth until 5 stars for the fifth line. So, effectively, we want the inner loop, which is responsible for printing data in every row, to run for 1 time for the first row, 2 times for the second row, so on and so forth until 5 times for the fifth row. So, we want the loop variable for the inner loop to be always equal to the loop variable value of the outer loop. Therefore, we will supply the range function the same outer loop variable I as the argument. Here, we can see the commands for the outer loop and the inner loop. But there is a small problem here. When the outer loop variable I is equal to 0, that is, when the outer loop runs for the first time, then the range function for the inner loop does not generate any list of numbers because range function receives an argument as 0. This is due to the fact that we supplied the outer loop variable as the argument to this range function. Therefore, the inner loop will not run for even a single time when the outer loop runs for the first time. But we want the inner loop to run 1 time. So, I will change the argument to the range function for the inner loop to I plus 1. So, the inner loop statement becomes for j in range I plus 1. Thus, when I has a value of 0, the range function for the inner loop will have an argument of I plus 1 which evaluates to 1, thus generating the number 1 in the list. Thus the inner loop runs for 1 time. Now, when the outer loop runs for the second time, I will have a value of 1, making the argument for the range function of the inner loop as 1 plus 1 is equal to 2. So the range function will generate numbers 0 and 1, making the inner loop run for a total of 2 times. Similarly, when outer loop runs for the third, fourth and fifth time, then the inner loop will also run for a total of 3, 4 and 5 times respectively. Now, whatever we want to print as contents of the rows, we need to place inside the inner for loop. print star end equal to no space. In our case, it's just a star. So we will use this statement. We want certain number of stars to be printed again and again in each row. And this we are taking care of by executing the print statement multiple times through the inner for loop. We want the stars to be printed in the line continuously, so we have changed the end value to no space. After the inner for loop completes for every iteration of the outer for loop, we want the cursor to move on to the next row. For that, we are using the print statement with no arguments. If we don't use this print statement, then all our output will come in one single line and different rows will not exist. Let's see this in Python ideally now. For I in range 5, for j in range I plus 1, print star end equal to no space, print no arguments. Saving and running now. So we are getting the desired output. The first line contains a single star, the second one contains 2 stars, third one contains 3 stars, fourth line contains 4 stars, the fifth and the last line contains a total of 5 stars. I already told you that if we do not use the last print statement, then all our output will come in a single line. Let me comment it and run the program to see. So all my output is coming in a single line, which is not the desired result. And I also told you that in the inner loop, if we give the argument as I, then the inner loop will not run for the first iteration of the outer loop, which means nothing will be printed in the first line or the first row. Let me see. So here you are able to see that the first line does not contain any number of stars and the total number of rows with stars is equal to 4. So this is not the correct output. To have a star printed in the first line also, we will have to use I plus 1 as the argument of the range function inside the inner loop. So I have resumed back to my original program and we will see again the difference in the result that we are getting. Now we are getting the correct output. Now I want you to do something for me. If you have not yet subscribed to my channel, then hit that subscribe button right away. There is also a notification bell. Click that too. Secondly, give this video a like by clicking the like button. We have come to the end of the video now. If you have any doubts, do mention the same in the comments of the video. I will get back to you in no time to resolve your problems. I will be back with more videos and more learning. Until then, bye.